I never thought the day would come when my own daughter would choose someone else over me. Not because I didn't trust her, not because I didn't love her endlessly, but because I had poured my entire life into her, shaping her, nurturing her, guiding her. From the moment she was born, I felt an unshakable bond, a connection that was pure and unbreakable. Or so I thought. I remember holding her tiny hand in the hospital room, the way her fingers wrapped around mine, so small, so delicate, so trusting. In that moment, I made a promise to myself that I would always be there for her, no matter what. Life, however, has a cruel way of testing us, of showing us how fragile even the strongest bonds can be. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly, with small disagreements between my daughter and her husband. I had always known her husband as a polite, reserved man. In the early days of their marriage, I welcomed him into our family with open arms. I wanted nothing more than for my daughter to be happy. I would help in any way I could, offering guidance, advice, or simply listening when tensions arose. I believed that family meant supporting each other, that love was more important than pride, but I was wrong. The first time it happened, it was subtle, almost unnoticeable to anyone else, but to me, it was like a cold shadow passing over my heart. There was an argument, something trivial about bills and household responsibilities. I intervened carefully, offering a gentle suggestion. I didn't mean to interfere. I only wanted to help. But my daughter looked at me in that moment with a sharpness I had never seen before. She sided with him immediately, dismissing me, as if my words carried no weight. I froze. My mind raced. Did I do something wrong? Had I failed her as a mother? But when I opened my mouth to speak, she didn't let me. Her husband, confident and assertive, argued his point, and my daughter nodded, agreeing with him as if I were invisible. I remember going to my room that night and sitting on my bed, the air around me thick with sorrow. Tears streamed down my face, not just for the hurt of the moment, but for the years I had spent building a bond I thought was unbreakable, only to watch it begin to crack. In the days that followed, I tried to reach her gently. I left little notes in her kitchen, small reminders of my love and care. I cooked her favorite dishes, hoping to bridge the distance growing between us. Sometimes, I would sit quietly in the living room, just watching her from afar, longing for the warmth of her laughter and the easy conversations we used to share. But every effort seemed to push her further away. She had chosen her husband's voice over mine, and each time it happened, it felt as though a piece of me was being chipped away. I remember one particular evening, a winter night when the wind howled outside like it was echoing my inner turmoil. They had been arguing about something I didn't even fully understand, something about money and decisions I had no right to influence. But as always, I spoke, softly, carefully, offering advice not as a critic but as a concerned grandmother. My daughter didn't just disagree, she looked at me with eyes I had once known as warm and loving, now cold and distant. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "You're just my mother. He's my husband. Trust him, not yourself." Those words pierced me. I felt the ground beneath me disappear. I wanted to shout, to beg, to make her see the love and wisdom that had been my life's work. But instead, I stood there silently, letting the words sink in, each one cutting deeper than the last. That night, I sat alone, wrapped in a blanket, feeling the weight of invisibility pressing down on me. I had never felt so alone in my own home, so forgotten by the very person I had lived for. Weeks turned into months. The tension became a constant undercurrent in our home. I watched my daughter drift further into her new world, a world where I was no longer central, no longer the one she turned to for comfort and guidance. The warmth we had shared, the whispered conversations in the night, the giggles over small secrets, the quiet understanding of each other's hearts, faded slowly, like sunlight behind storm clouds. I could see her leaning more and more on her husband, trusting his voice over mine, and every glance she gave me felt like a reminder of my displacement. Yet, despite the pain, I refused to give up on her. I could not. Love, true love, does not allow you to walk away, even when the hurt is unbearable. I remembered the nights I stayed awake when she was sick, the sacrifices I had made to ensure her happiness, the countless times I had put her needs before my own. I reminded myself that I could endure anything if it meant keeping the door open for her to return, to reconnect, to remember that family is more than arguments and disagreements. One day, the situation escalated. Her husband had made a decision without consulting anyone in the family, and I, as always, tried to mediate gently. He responded harshly, aggressively, with words that stung and surprised me. I had never raised my voice in anger before, but that day, I felt a fire in my chest. I tried to explain, to reason, to calm him, but my daughter, standing silently beside him, looked at me and spoke in a voice I will never forget. "You don't know our life, Mom. He knows what's best. I trust him, not you." It was the final blow. I felt as if the ground had shifted beneath me. I had given everything to this child, yet in a single sentence, she had turned her back on me. I sat in my room that night, the walls of the house pressing in like they were closing on my heart. I cried until I could cry no more, until my tears were dry but my soul still aching. I felt betrayed, abandoned, invisible, and yet, through the pain, a small voice whispered, "Wait, love, be patient. She will come back when she is ready." I clung to that whisper, even as the days dragged on. I continued to offer love without expectation, support without interference. I watched quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes in the moments when she allowed me near. I reminded myself that love is not a transaction. It is a force that endures, that waits, that persists even in the face of rejection. That then life delivered its harshest lesson. Her husband faced a health crisis, something sudden and frightening that shook the household to its core. My daughter, overwhelmed with fear and responsibility, finally turned to me, not just as her mother, but as a guide, as a safe harbor. In those weeks, I stepped in quietly, carefully, offering support, advice, and care without judgment. I was patient when she was angry, compassionate when she was anxious, and steady when the world around her seemed to crumble. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, she began to see me not as an intruder in her life but as the constant presence I had always been. One night, as I helped her care for her husband, she looked at me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Mom, I was blind. I didn't see what I was losing until it almost slipped away." Tears filled my eyes too, but this time they were not from pain, they were from relief, from the warmth of being recognized again, from the love that had never truly left us. I held her hand tightly, feeling the bond that had been tested and strained but never broken. Through this experience, I learned that love is not about being chosen first. It is about enduring, about being patient, about holding space even when you are hurt. My daughter had chosen someone else over me. Yes, Buff, she had come back when life reminded her of the depth of our bond, when she realized that true family does not abandon, does not falter, does not fade. Now, when I look at her, I see both the woman she has become and the little girl I once held in my arms. I see resilience, growth, and understanding, and I see myself not just as a grandmother, but as a woman who has endured betrayal, heartbreak, and loneliness, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and even more devoted to the family I love. I tell this story not because it is unique, but because it is a reminder that bonds tested by time, by misunderstandings, by life's harsh lessons, can survive if nurtured with patience, empathy, and unwavering love. Even when we feel abandoned, even when those we hold dearest choose another path, hope remains, love remains, and in the quiet moments, when hearts are ready to listen, to forgive, to see, family can be whole again. I often think back to her childhood, to the days when her laughter filled the house like sunlight pouring through windows. She was so small, so full of life, with a curiosity that could not be contained. I remember one rainy afternoon, when the sky was dark and the wind rattled the windows, she had come running to me, soaked to the bone, clutching a broken doll. Her tiny hands were trembling as she explained how it had happened, how she had tripped and fallen. I sat her on my lap, drying her hair with a soft towel, and whispered, "It's okay, my darling. Things break, but we can fix them. Just like this doll, just like us." That day, as I glued the doll's arm back into place, I realized something crucial. She would face the world's brokenness, and it would be my job to teach her how to endure, how to heal, and how to remain whole. I thought those lessons were engraved deep within her, that my love and guidance had prepared her for life's storms. But when she sided with her husband over me, dismissing my words, I realized that life was a storm I had never truly prepared myself for. There were nights when I would sit by her empty bedroom, just after she had moved out with her husband, and I could almost hear her laughter echoing in the silence. I thought about the first time she had learned to ride a bicycle, how she had fallen countless times, scraped her knees, yet gotten back up with determination. How I had cheered her on, held her hand, and whispered, "You can do it. I believe in you." Now, years later, she had fallen again, this time emotionally, and I wondered if she even remembered who was holding her up. All those times I tried reaching her in small ways. I would leave little notes in her favorite books, reminders of the stories we used to share. Remember our afternoons reading by the window. One note read, "I'm still here, always." I would bake her favorite bread, hoping the aroma would bring back memories of warmth, of home, of the comfort of family. I would sit in the kitchen, the bread cooling on the counter, watching her empty chair at the table, longing for her to return. She came home occasionally, and each time I would sense the tension between us. It was not anger that kept her distant, it was something more subtle, more insidious: pride, loyalty to her husband, a belief that she had to choose sides. And each time, I reminded myself that love does not demand, does not force, it waits. And I waited, though each day was a quiet agony. There was one particular evening that stayed with me forever. I had spent hours preparing her favorite meal, the kitchen filled with the smells of garlic, herbs, and freshly baked bread. She came home later than usual, exhausted, and I could see the weariness in her eyes. I approached gently, offering the meal. She looked at me and smiled briefly, but there was something behind that smile, a hesitation, a barrier. She sat at the table, barely speaking, nodding as if to acknowledge my presence, but not really seeing me. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream, "I am your mother. I have loved you your whole life." But I did not. I smiled instead, silently placing the plate in front of her. Sometimes, love is quiet, patient, invisible, but it is always there, even when unrecognized. Weeks later, the crisis came. Her husband became seriously ill, and the household changed overnight. The man she had defended so fiercely was suddenly vulnerable, fragile, in need of care and support. And in that moment, my daughter, overwhelmed by fear and responsibility, finally looked to me, not with defensiveness, not with dismissal, but with desperation. I stepped in carefully, knowing I had to tread lightly. I offered guidance, reassurance, and practical help. I cooked, cleaned, managed medications, and simply listened when she needed to speak. The tension between us began to soften, the walls she had built crumbling slowly under the weight of reality. One night, after a particularly difficult day, she broke down. Tears flowed freely, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to be vulnerable with me. "Mom," she whispered, voice trembling, "I didn't see it before. I didn't realize what I was doing. I was so blind." I sat beside her, holding her hand, feeling the warmth return between us. "I never left you," I said softly. "I have always been here, always." Her eyes filled with tears, and she rested her head on my shoulder. The years of distance, of hurt, of misunderstandings, beginning to melt away. I could feel the weight of her guilt, of her recognition, and I knew that the path to healing had begun. Over the following weeks, I continued to support her, not out of obligation, but out of love. We talked late into the night, sharing memories, fears, and hopes. She began to confide in me again, to trust me again, to remember the bond we had built over decades. And in those moments, I realized something profound: love is not measured by loyalty at a single moment, but by endurance, by patience, by the willingness to stand even when ignored, to care even when rejected. I remember one quiet afternoon, as we sat together on the porch, sunlight filtering through the trees. She looked at me and said, "Mom, I forgot what it felt like to have you by my side. I forgot how much your presence matters." I squeezed her hand gently. "It never left," I whispered. "I have always been here." She smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and for the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest lift. I realized that nearly losing her had been a lesson, not just for her, but for me. It taught me the depth of my patience, the resilience of my love, and the power of forgiveness. We spent the next months rebuilding what had been strained. Not everything was perfect, not every day was easy, but the connection returned, stronger and more profound than before. She began to include me in her life again, seeking advice, sharing her joys and sorrows, and acknowledging the sacrifices I had made. One evening, as we sat together by the fire, she reached for my hand and said softly, "Mom, I am sorry. I was so wrong. I didn't see what I had until I nearly lost it." Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, of joy, of a love that had endured. I held her hand tightly, feeling the warmth of a bond restored. Through this journey, I learned that love is not about being chosen first, or about winning arguments, or about always being right. Love is about endurance, patience, forgiveness, and the quiet strength to stand even when it feels like all is lost. My daughter's temporary betrayal, painful as it was, revealed to me the depth of my own resilience and the unwavering nature of true familial love. Now, when I look at her, I see both the woman she has become and the little girl who once ran to me with scraped knees and whispered secrets. I see growth, understanding, and the beauty of relationships tested and strengthened by adversity. And I see myself, not just as her mother, but as a grandmother who endured heartbreak, learned the power of patience, and emerged with a deeper appreciation for the unshakable bonds of family. Life has a way of teaching us lessons in the hardest ways. Sometimes, those we love will choose others over us. Sometimes, we will feel invisible, abandoned, and betrayed. But if we hold space for love, if we remain patient and steadfast, if we forgive and nurture rather than demand and resent, family can endure, family can heal, and hearts, even after being broken, can find their way back to each other. I tell this story not to boast, not to seek sympathy, but to remind anyone listening that love, when true and patient, is a force that survives storms, misunderstandings, and even temporary betrayals. It is the constant in a world of change, the light in darkness, the anchor in a turbulent sea, and in the end, love is what brings us home, back to the hearts of those we hold most dear. As the days passed, the crisis with her husband worsened. The man she had defended so fiercely, the man she had placed above me, now lay fragile and dependent. I watched my daughter pacing the floor, anxiety etched into every line of her face, her hands trembling as she tried to manage medications, schedules, and her own exhaustion. It was in these moments, when her guard was down, that I felt both sorrow and relief. Sorrow for the pain she was enduring, relief that she finally looked to me, truly, for support. I remember one night, when the house was quiet except for the soft beeping of a monitor, she burst into tears in front of me. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she whispered, voice cracking. I had seen her confident, determined, assertive, but in that moment, I saw vulnerability, fear, and the realization of how much she had underestimated life, and perhaps me. I held her close, just as I had held her in infancy when nightmares woke her from sleep. I whispered, "I am here. You are not alone. We will get through this, together." And together, we did. I stayed by her side, sleeping in chairs when she could not, cooking meals, reminding her to eat, reminding her to breathe. Slowly, she began to rely on me, not just for advice but for emotional grounding. The walls she had built, her loyalty and pride, began to crumble, replaced by recognition and gratitude. But the path to healing was not linear. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, she lashed out at me in frustration. "I can't do this," she shouted. "Why is everything so hard?" Her voice, though angry, carried desperation. I remained calm, remembering that patience was my only weapon. "Life is hard sometimes," I said softly. "But we endure, my darling. We do what we must, and we hold each other close. You are not alone." Tears welled in her eyes as she fell into my embrace. She whispered, I forgot how much you do for me, for all of us. I was blind, Mom." That night, I realized how close I had come to losing her, not physically, not permanently, but emotionally. I had nearly lost her trust, her heart, her connection. It terrified me to think that all my years of love, sacrifice, and guidance could have been rendered invisible by a few misguided choices and misunderstandings. Yet, here she was, finally seeing me, finally acknowledging that love does not demand, it waits. The crisis slowly resolved, and with it, the tension in our household began to fade. We spent long evenings talking, laughing softly, sometimes crying, but always reconnecting. My daughter began to confide in me again, not just about her husband's health, but about her fears, hopes, and regrets. Each conversation was a thread weaving the tapestry of our relationship back together. I often thought about the lessons I had learned through this ordeal. Love is not about control, about being chosen first, about always being listened to. Love is about endurance, patience, forgiveness, and presence. I had learned that the bonds we forge with our children, with our family, are not fragile simply because they are tested. They are strengthened through trials, through misunderstandings, through near loss. There was one night, particularly quiet and serene, when we sat together by the window, watching the stars. My daughter reached for my hand and said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't understand before. I thought I was protecting our family, but I almost lost what mattered most. I almost lost you." I held her hand gently, tears streaming silently down my cheeks. "You didn't lose me," I whispered. "I have always been here, and I will always be here." That is what love does. It endures, it waits, it forgives. From that moment onward, our bond began to heal fully. She began including me in her life again, not just in moments of crisis, but in daily joys, small triumphs, and ordinary conversations. She would call me just to share a funny story, or ask my opinion on decisions, showing me that she had learned, through hardship, to recognize the value of the love that had never wavered. Reflecting on it now, I realized that nearly losing her was the most painful lesson, but also the most valuable. It taught me the depth of my own patience, the resilience of maternal love, and the necessity of enduring, even when it seems no one sees you. My daughter's temporary betrayal was not an end, but a test, a reminder that family is a living, breathing entity, subject to storms, but capable of renewal. Even today, I see glimpses of those difficult months, the fear, the frustration, the arguments, but they no longer sting the same way. They remind me of how far we have come, of the strength we discovered within ourselves, and the unbreakable bond that survived the storm. There were mornings when I would make tea for both of them, and she would glance at me, a small smile tugging at her lips, and say, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Those words, simple yet profound, carried the weight of reconciliation, understanding, and enduring love. I often think back to my own life, too, the lessons I learned through struggle and loss, and I realized that every sacrifice, every tear, every sleepless night had prepared me for this moment, to be the steady presence when my daughter faltered, to hold her hand when she nearly let go, and to remind her that love is not measured in agreement, but in endurance. The bond we now share is deeper than before. It is not naive. It is aware of the fragility of trust, of the consequences of miscommunication, of the pain of feeling abandoned, but it is stronger because it has been tested. My daughter knows now, as I always knew, that family is not a hierarchy of who is right or wrong. It is a web of love, support, patience, and understanding that survives when nurtured, even when strained. I tell this story to anyone listening, because so many families experience the same trials. Children grow, marriages shift, loyalties are tested, and sometimes those we love seem to choose others over us. It is painful, heartbreaking, and at times nearly impossible to endure. But if we hold space for love, if we remain patient and steadfast, if we forgive and nurture rather than demand and resent, family can endure, family can heal, and hearts, even after being broken, can find their way back to each other now. When I look at my daughter, I see not just the woman she has become, but also the little girl I once held in my arms. I see resilience, growth, and the capacity for understanding, and I see myself, not just as her mother or grandmother, but as a witness to the enduring power of love, a love that survives betrayal, misunderstanding, and near-loss. Life has a way of teaching its hardest lessons through the ones we hold dearest. And though I nearly lost my daughter to blindness and misplaced loyalty, I gained a profound understanding of patience, forgiveness, and the unshakable strength of maternal love. Now, we laugh together, cry together, and share the ordinary and extraordinary moments with a newfound appreciation for one another. Every touch, every glance, every word carries the weight of history, of struggle, of endurance, and I know, deep in my heart, that no matter what storms may come in the future, our bond will remain unbroken, because love, true love, does not demand, it waits, it forgives, it endures, and in the end, it brings us home, back to each other, back to the hearts we never truly lose, even when the world seems determined to take them away. I want anyone listening to remember this. Even when your child, your loved one, seems to choose someone else, when you feel invisible and abandoned, hope remains, love remains, and when hearts are ready to listen, to forgive, and to see, family can always find its way back, stronger and deeper than before. And that is the story of how I nearly lost my daughter, how I endured the pain of betrayal, and how, through patience, unwavering love, and quiet endurance, our bond was restored. It is a story of heartbreak, struggle, and near loss, but most importantly, it is a story of love that never faltered, even in the darkest hours, and a reminder that family, when nurtured with patience and understanding, can survive anything.